Okay. Should I say hey guys?
Yeah, I think it's a thing.
I feel like it is a thing now. Hey guys.
Hey guys.
I'm Laurie Wilson.
I'm Elle Anzalone.
And this is
The Cynical Therapist.
We are so I was cynical. I feel like this week I kind of got a little...
Do you think it's burnout?
No, I think it's... I don't know. I just feel like there's different times when maybe like stress gets to a certain point or like... I don't really know.
It's the
Family
work,
stuff.
family, home life, relationship, and then it kind of like bubbles over.
We are going to talk today about
Codependency. It's kind of a buzzword.
Ooh. It's such a buzzword because people are like, what does it mean?
It is like a thing, you know?
I have the literal definition if you guys want it. And then you can explain. So, in the dictionary, codependency is defined as excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, typically one who requires support on account of an illness or addiction. I feel like codependency can happen regardless of illness or addiction.
I think women are socialized to be codependent.
That makes sense.
I think we are the nurturers. I mean,
Sure.
We're kind of socialized in that we need to show up for people and pretend that everything is okay in order to nurture, and that kind of breeds codependency. Especially our parents' generation was that, you know, a woman was in a different spot, and now we're in a generation where it's like women are theoretically equal to men, and this is kind of, I think, the upheaval right now is the codependency piece where women are supposed to be.
Do you think you see more codependency in women than men?
Yes.
I think so too.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think we hate to use it's so interesting about like psychology. It's because, you know, we're in this space now where we don't want to use generalizations and we're
carefully.
But there's a lot of, I guess, easy ways to, like, when you talk about men and women, to say, like, okay, this is very typical. It's like that men are from Mars, women are from Venus book.
Totally.
Like, there's some typical patterns that some people will display.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be just a woman thing or just a man thing, but from whatever, 13 years in the field, seeing thousands of clients, sometimes a man is kind of codependent on another man in friendship, and sometimes a woman is codependent on another woman, but usually I would say 70% of the time a woman comes into therapy and couples therapy and really doesn't know where she ends and her partner begins.
Sure.
Right? And so it's kind of like putting together like, well, does that belong to you? Or is that your partner's issue? And the way I describe codependency to my clients is if you're sitting in a room and somebody comes into the room and they're in a bad mood, and you can tell they're in a bad mood because they're like slamming doors or huffing around or whatever your partner does to show you they're in a bad mood. If you are codependent, you believe it's either your fault or your responsibility, and it is your game plan because you need to fix the mood. And if you are nervous when somebody comes home and they're sad or they're mad and you think it's your responsibility, it becomes you're consumed by this idea of improving the world through other people's moods and giving yourself a false sense of control. Because every once in a while it works, right? You're like, oh, he's upset, he must be hungry, I feed him. Yeah. And then he's in a better mood, and then I trick myself into thinking that I actually fixed it.
Well, and that probably goes back to then what you learn, because I think about that, and I think it's easy, right? It's easy for, if, like when we're kids, if my husband comes home and he's in a bad mood, that's my discomfort to want to fix it. Yeah. Now, my husband's never in a bad mood.
Of course not, right? I mean, you're a perfect wife. Why would you be?
So, like, I think that's what it is, right? That codependency piece is, it's also that discomfort you have, and then you want to fix.
I want to shove it down, and so I do all these bizarre things in order to mind read and fix your emotion, when really that's my stuff. My stuff is the anxiety about your mood,
discomfort, right? And your mood,
and your issue is the fact that I'm nervous and anxious because I'm trying to fix and mind read, when really you're just preoccupied with what, you know. Maybe you saw a car accident on the way home, and you saw somebody who got hurt, and you're really bothered by that, and then here I am trying to bake you cookies. And it's like, dude, like, I just need a minute. Oh, what do you mean you need a minute? Can I sit by you while you get a minute? And it's like, dude, just chill out. Oh, now you're angry. Why? I'm always like, I can never talk to you, or whatever that.
Yeah, it's kind of taking away that person's process with their emotion as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's sharing that, and that's that cycle that we talk about.
So what would be the, like, quick 5 things that if you know you're codependent. I know that's something that I struggled with. I think
makes you a good therapist
early on. That makes sense. Yeah. As long as you're not codependent with your, like, right, if you're able to recognize it, but it's like, if you were codependent with a client, what that would look like instead of having boundaries is trying to fix, right? So you wouldn't be listening to their emotions, and even if they reached out after that, you would actually be literally like
sick,
baking the cookies or doing the action to fix them. So
sending them memes or supporting them and checking in with them, instead of it being like, wow, that was a really hard session, I'm really impressed with your progress, here's your homework, read some Melody Beatty, Codependency No More, big book.
Awesome book.
Take care of yourself, divide yourself from everybody else. And working in treatment, we both worked in treatment for a while, there's so much codependency. And it's kind of obvious, which is really interesting to me that people don't know what codependency is, where I'm like...
Well, and like you said, I think it's a buzzword. People are like, oh, I'm codependent
it's
or
bad.
Whatever. But there's no explanation, and that's why I like Melanie's book, because it actually breaks down different, like, not different types of codependency, but different ways in which you could be
activated
codependent. Because even, like, being irritable, right? Like, if my partner comes home and they're quiet, then I get irritable. I'm still taking their emotion away. Like, there's still something about how I can't react appropriately or control my emotions based on their emotion. Or maybe trust them
to work through it. It's kind of like taking away their process when you make it about, like, if they're upset, instead of being like, well, they're upset. And this is really hard. I mean, even as a clinician, even though my husband is upset about something that has nothing to do with me, there's something that sits like right in my stomach, on top of my stomach, that's like, you need to do something about it, you know? And I often say, you know, feelings are not a call for action, but for me, it's anxiety. The anxiety is underneath the instability or not knowing what's next, or that uncertainty of what's going to happen, instead of it being like, hey, give me a minute, I'm just really going through something right now, I love you, I need to check out for a second, I need to kind of like pace the house, or my husband.
And I love that idea. What'd you say? Feelings are not a call to action. So pausing in it, because I think that's where we get, you know, activated. I need to fix, even with kids, right? Like if somebody's throwing a tantrum, we're not responding, and I always say respond to the emotion. We're not responding to the emotion, we're trying to fix, or we're trying to, and a lot of that is for our comfort. And it's like if you're in a public place and your kid's on the floor throwing a fit, and I remember like my face would get hot and I would start sweating, because it wasn't about my kid's reaction that she couldn't get scratch and sniff stickers or whatever. I mean, that time it was my shame of people watching me having an out of control kid. So even codependency with my kid, where it's like, well, what will these complete strangers think of me at the Dollar Tree? Like, because it matters, you know? But walking away and being like activated and flooded with emotions, and that's usually that shame piece where it's like, I'm out of control. I'm out of control. And it's like, I'm expected to somehow fix, but it's really not about fixing. It's about kind of being in the moment and letting your kid express emotions and let them kind of self-soothe. Otherwise, they'll be an adult with a codependency issue, where it's like, I don't know how to soothe. I'm going to use other people to medicate my discomfort instead of drugs or alcohol. So it's like addicted to emotions almost. And to people, like you said earlier. What are like, how would somebody know? Obviously, I think without going to therapy, how would somebody know? Okay, I'm having some codependency. I'm having some codependent behaviors.
FOMO. The fear of missing out. If you are in a relationship and you are terrified to be without your partner because you don't know how to behave unless there's somebody sitting by you kind of mirroring to you what you need to do. Like, you don't know who you are when you're by yourself. That's a huge red flag. It's like, who am I without my Instagram followers and my Snapchat story? Like, who am I?
My significant other.
I need people to kind of put me back together. It's kind of described as like two people with only one leg apiece, right? So you're kind of like one unit kind of walking everywhere, and if one falls away, then you're just collapsed on the ground. Like, I can't function unless there's somebody kind of propping me up. So that is, I think, number one is being afraid to be alone. Another great way of exploring codependency is saying no without an explanation.
Oh, I like that.
And seeing what happens in your body when you do it. And it's like, hey, can I borrow $5? And you're just like, no.
Yeah.
And like, like as a woman, you want to be like, it's close to rent, or, I don't have any cash or whatever. But it's like that, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then kind of noticing all those pieces in your body that fall apart, like that need to explain yourself, because
that's like a lack of boundaries.
Yes.
When you don't have those boundaries because you're kind of enmeshed in other people's emotions, you're not able to just say no without, right? I like that. There has to be an excuse.
Yeah, there has to be something, or else you'll feel bad, and then if you feel bad, then they feel bad.
Sure.
And then if they feel bad, that's your responsibility. And it goes right back to that no again. Like, that's sticky enmeshment.
I think that one of the other ones, if this is number 3, is rescuing.
Yes.
Like when you're talking about fixing or rescuing, I think because when we think of rescuing, right, it's like, I'm doing this person a favor.
Yeah. Oh.
I'm rescuing. But the problem with that is that kind of can lead into, like, say I have a friend who's very needy and I'm always helping that person, and I'm rescuing because I'm codependent. I'm rescuing. But then I'm also going to be resentful later. And that's where okay, this is not, I don't have appropriate boundaries. Like, I am just rescuing. I'm not just being a good friend. Because there's a difference. There's a difference between
showing up.
Yeah, there's a difference between showing up and rescuing.
Yes, totally.
So I think if you feel, and you'll know if you're rescuing because you'll constantly feel like you're drowning. Because it's like you're throwing all these life jackets to other people while you're drowning. And nobody is throwing any to you. So I think it's really easy to tell if you're, because you start to resent other people.
Totally. And then you isolate, and then you're rejecting, and it's almost that self-fulfilling prophecy that I am unlovable, right? So now I need to cling to somebody else. I need to find somebody else that'll make me whole. So it's that self-fulfilling thing, like, oh my gosh. No, I love that. No rescuing, for sure. But also not being invested in the outcome. And this is a big piece for me too, that when you're working with somebody or you're communicating with somebody, or you have that one friend that's super needy, when you offer advice, it's just to offer advice. It's not to control everything after you offer advice, or be angry at a person because they didn't take your advice, and that's why their life is so miserable, because you have it so figured out, right? It's like kind of lending words to somebody just to say them out loud.
Yeah, without being
checking
invested in the outcome.
Like, what did you do with that information? Pictures, or it didn't happen, It's like, oh my gosh, why not just communicate, accept, explore, support?
Yeah.
Instead of control.
Like if you let somebody borrow $10, like if I get your, hey, can I have $10? I give you $10, and then I'm like following you around watching what you're spending it on.
Right? Totally. Like, well, did you find my money in your wallet that you owe me? Yeah, no, that's so important.
And if you do that, so like say, for whatever reason, I gave you $10, and then you, I don't know, because you told me you needed something or whatever, and then I see you buying like fancy purses or whatever. But then I keep giving you $10 every time you're asking me for it. Like, that's not, I don't get to resent you because you...
Because you have shitty boundaries.
Yeah. Because I have shitty boundaries,
But that's what we do a lot. And I find that a lot of women come into therapy, they're like, but I said this to this person, or I was really a great wife and a great girlfriend, and nobody followed my example, or whatever. I'm like, wow, that's tricky. Or I sat on the couch and I was angry because my boyfriend husband wasn't including me. I was angry about that. And when he came to ask me what was wrong, I did the nothing. And then I was angry at him for not probing and pressing and asking for more, because he had these magic words he had to ask me or tell me, and it would have made it okay. That's soft control, though. I talk about the soft control of the parent, and that's codependency too, where the person who is incredibly codependent and a little bit controlling doesn't even know they're controlling, because they truly believe they're this good saint that's like giving of themselves, like the Joan of Arc. And it's really a way to control, because a lot of us have that person in our lives that only does things in order to either get attention or prove that they're a good person, instead of it actually being like, hey, this is a really amazing charity I'm giving money to. It's more like, so when they go around other people, they can talk about the charity that they work for. It's kind of that ego thing. So it becomes a sense of soft control, so people can admire me, but I'm really empty inside, because I don't fill my own cup, which is so cliche, but it's so true.
It's so true. So that's 4. So FOMO, saying no without making an excuse, not rescuing. The 4th one is
soft control.
And then the 5th one. What would be a 5th way for somebody to tell if they were struggling with codependency?
If you feel crazy, Like, if you are having an argument with somebody...
That's so big.
I know, but like, if you are having an argument with somebody and you really don't know why you're upset about it, but you really know that you're upset about something, the way I describe it is like, I know we've all had these relationships where just people bring out the worst in us, and like, you kind of have like a weird, like, you're a half person and they're a half person. So you're kind of trying to figure out what they need in the moment, and you have these arguments where you're like thinking while you're arguing, but like, I don't even care about any of this. It's that weird like half reality thing where you're like, is this actually a thing, or am I just arguing because it's important to argue, right? Like, why am I throwing my phone at the wall when I really don't care about what this person's doing? Why do I feel so crazy?
Yeah.
It's because you're thinking somehow that the way the person is behaving has a reflection on you. So if you have two people that are like strange and half people, then you're trying to read each other's minds, and you're coming up with these characters that you're playing, right? It's not actually a relationship or a conversation. It's these two people you're pretending to be. That's the way I look at it. And then you're like, the person that you're pretending to be and the person that you are sometimes gets so far away from each other that then you feel crazy. You're like, wait, what is my favorite color? Do I like baseball? Like, what is happening?
Where you get in relationships and it kind of becomes, you become
what they want instead of who you are, right? So you lose pieces of yourself, and then you're like, wait, okay, did I, like, when I met this person, I had this, this, and this, and now I'm not even allowed to have those things, and I'm sullen, I'm anxious, I'm angry, and I'm resentful, but I have no real words underneath it. It's just a mood all the time. Like, every time you see that person, you're like...
I think there's a lot of anger and resentment that comes into codependency.
Truth.
And then people try to, like, you feel... I don't know what the word would be. Like, you feel... like it's okay for you to go around and be angry and resentful at everybody because you're doing good.
Yes, you're a martyr.
Yeah,
right?
You're a martyr.
Nobody sees how much work I do. I work so hard to make you happy, and you're not even happy.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had to do everything.
Yep.
Right?
And that's kind of your responsibility, I think, to take a step back and to be like, okay, yes, I do see this. I do see that I don't have... Because if you don't have great boundaries with people and you're codependent, you are going to struggle in a lot of relationships.
Get swallowed up.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be a different person in every one of your relationships. Right? Until you get to therapy and you're like, I have like 6 different identities that I'm working with. And then you think, well, shoot, like, okay, so I was into country music when I was with this guy. And then I really liked sports cars when I was with this guy. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh no, I don't even know who I am. I haven't really had a full identity yet. And it's kind of the early 20s where you start figuring out those things. And if your codependency is rewarded instead of kind of butted up against like some frustration, or you're like, oh, this is miserable, and I get to therapy and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels so much better. If you get rewarded for these behaviors, like the helicopter parent, or the mom that overloves, or the controlling mother-in-law kind of thing, where it's like, ugh.
I think that's why it's hard to recognize, because you just end up getting angry and resentful, and you don't, but you're doing good. So it's like, wait, I'm doing good. Why am I feeling this way? And so that's why I think it's confusing, because it's not about doing good.
Nope.
It's about having good boundaries and not...
And knowing where you
not
end
overstepping them,
and the other people begin. Yeah, it's just like, oh, wait, he's angry. Oh, that has nothing to do with me. And that is freedom. And that is really hard. I mean, I say it out loud like it's an easy thing to do, but it's really hard. And I have to do a lot of like self-talk where when somebody's upset with me or whatever, or I'm waiting for that moment for a conversation to happen, I'm anxious about having a conversation about something, not letting that like infiltrate what's really happening, which is just 2 people hanging out. It's not a big deal. Like, I don't understand why this has become my responsibility to keep you happy. And there's nothing more irritating than the person who's smothering, right?
Yeah.
And there's people have a sense of like the anxiety that's attached to codependency. They're like, you're being a weirdo. I don't know what your problem is.
And that's why I think we talk about there's different kinds, right? Because there's like the controlling codependent. There's also like the martyr codependent. I feel like there's different...
There's the enabler. Codependent, where it's just makes excuses. I mean, that's my mom and her dog. Sorry, Mom.
And her dog.
Her dog is awful, but she continues to reward bad behavior. And then instead of being firm and like punishing bad behavior or rewarding only good behavior, she makes excuses. He's a terrible dog. He's awful. She's like, he's getting better. I'm like, in what way? Right? But again, I could be upset at her about it, but that's just who she is. She likes to spoil dogs. The dog's an asshole. Right? right? But she's almost codependent on her dog where she makes excuses for his bad behavior. I'm like, it's okay that you have a bad dog. That's okay.
No, the excuses are, and I think that's something we see in treatment where excuses are made for bad behavior and there's not.
Well, the divorce really messed them up, and his dad and I don't get along anymore. You know what I mean? So therefore I get to take the brunt. And then when a parent takes the brunt of their kid's addiction, the kid gets to get high, and the parent has all the feelings and the guilt and the shame and pays all the money. But the irony is that the drug addict really doesn't care a lot about that, right?
Sure.
Because it's more about the addiction piece for them or getting high. But if you have somebody who feels guilty for you,
then you don't have to feel guilty.
Exactly.
How nice.
Yeah, it's really nice, actually, which is kind of like why addicts hate Al-Anon.
Yeah.
Because Al-Anon is all boundaries.
Yes.
Right? And addicts are like, no, don't go to Al-Anon. They'll stop paying for my drugs.
Boundaries would be a good topic too, because I feel like in order to, that's kind of like the counter of codependency, is learning how to have boundaries and figuring out what those are and what those look like.
Being able to scan the body when you're setting boundaries and thinking, oh my gosh, this was too hard. Or even setting a boundary, reneging on the boundary, bringing that to therapy and going, dude, I tried and all of this stuff came up. What do you think about that? And then having a clinician be like, wow, this means this, and this is probably about that, and like, great job trying to set a boundary. And it's really actually good work to come in with failed goals and be like, dude, these were my barriers, these were my obstacles. I didn't think it would be as hard as it was,
like,
or I couldn't even complete it. Totally.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would be as hard as it was. Because it's so hard to say no. It is so hard.
It's so hard to say no without an excuse.
Yes.
Yeah. My husband and I we got a text from the neighbors because they got a pool. And they invited us over. And so I'm sitting in the car with him trying to figure out how to, like, what do you want me to say? Do you want to stop by when we get home? Whatever. And he's like, yeah, we'll just let him know we're driving back from Big Bear and we have to go to LAX and then we can try to come over later. And as I'm typing it, I'm like, that's so much.
That's like overwhelming.
Yeah,
right?
And so I was like thinking about here's my codependency. I was thinking about how that would be a lot of information. She'd be like, thanks for sharing.
That might, like your text, like, would you like to come over and play in my pool? You're like, well, but it's like, oh, like, oh, my neighbor's crazy. Never mind.
Yes.
Yeah, that.
So I was like, that's a lot. So I'm just going to say, yeah, we're traveling back. We might, stop by later. But it is, I think, really interesting because I think a lot of people, whether they're codependent or not, have a hard time not making excuses when they have to say no to something. Yes. So practicing that is really powerful.
Like everybody's a toddler this morning.
And if somebody asks you, like if you say no, if somebody's like, can I have $10? And you're like, no. If they're like, why not?
Right?
Another boundary to that would be, I really don't feel like that's any of your business.
Perfect.
I feel like that's a really good boundary.
But then you're a bitch. Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
Like, I see how it is. Yeah. But I'm telling you, like, most people who want that $10 have a plan B, C, D, E, F, G, right? That's what I always say. Don't be plan A.
And then the part where, and then you're a bitch, is because when you start to put up boundaries, like when you say no, people push back. Especially if you have struggled with codependency and they're not used to you having boundaries. It's going to be like, well, where did this come from?
Yeah,
and so
right?
as
How
you put
dare
that
you
up,
stand
it's
up for
hard.
yourself?
Yeah.
Rude.
It's hard. Yeah.
But that's, again, a woman-man thing. Right? The goggles of patriarchy. Like, if I were to go to a very successful man and say, can I have a business loan for $25K? And he was like, no, I'd be like, totally understood. Right? But if somebody asked me for $10 and I'm like, no, and they're like, bitch. They're like, oh, okay. Well, I don't have any cash, and I can Venmo it. Like, that's, for me, it's like that. And I have to be like, it's fine. No, it's my $10.
Yeah.
That has nothing, like, you don't get to just take my money. Like, but also me wanting to be liked is a huge piece of it too. Yeah. Not just FOMO, but like, who am I amongst my friends? But I'm also the person who's seen as the person with great boundaries. And nobody asks me for $10. It's just straight up.
That's good. That's good
because I just don't, right? I just don't.
Yeah.
But it's because I'm a therapist, and it's because I got swallowed up, and it's because I had that moment where I'm like, I have no time for myself, right? But I think once you hit like 40, you're like, ugh, I just want to sit in a chair.
No, I'm just tired.
I'm just tired. This is nonsense.
What would your suggestion to people be if they're relating to the 5 things that we're talking about?
Research. Just hit up some codependency articles. There's so much stuff on it now. Psychology Today is a great like has great articles. I keep reading them, and I send you a couple of them. I'm like, this is fantastic. They're really short, like 3-minute reads on codependency. Try your best not to use your codependent brain to define codependency. If you're really triggered and you're like, oh my gosh, this is totally me. All of my relationships are being like swallowed up by my inability to know who I am and set boundaries. Maybe trying a boundary every once in a while. I often assign that task to my clients, like go out there and say no. I mean, even no thank you would be
I'll actually hand, I think there's like a Kleenex box in our office, and I'll hand it to a client and I'll be like, I'm going to ask you for that, but I don't want you to give it to me. And I'll be like, can I have the Kleenex box? And they'll be like, no. And then I'll be like, but I really need it. And like you can see the discomfort, and they end up like handing it to me eventually, and I'm like, no, like that's like it's okay for you to not, like it's okay for you, no matter how bad I make you feel.
Yes, make you feel, right?
Make you feel, because you take that on. So yeah, I think reading about it, getting obviously the book, Codependent No More. Yeah. They have a workbook with it too.
And there's a really great daily meditation on the Betty Ford website where it's a daily codependency no more. It's like an Al-Anon, or there's Coda meetings too. I mean, I feel like that's like a maybe later, right? Because it's like a 12-step group based on codependency, which is a great resource. It's not for everybody, but it's a great resource. But having people around you to normalize and kind of put their arm around you and be like, yeah, I remember that. You know? And kind of being able to notice when you're, I hate this word, when you're triggered, to anxiously put things back together.
To fix and rescue,
to control. And being able to recognize where you feel in your body, because for me it's right here. Sometimes people feel like a heat flush in their face, or their hands start sweating because
I think I definitely feel it right here. Yeah, it just, and it might even be like a reaction that's you don't start to recognize early on until after you do it. So I rescue, and then I go into therapy and talk to my therapist and break it down. And then we talked about how that was a rescue. So you might actually you might be resenting before you even realize you're doing any of the other actions. So I think also talking to somebody or figuring out what that
taking the
what
temperature.
That means. Sure.
If you're consistently angry at your partner for not being able to read your mind, you should probably talk about codependency and not being able to articulate what you need, but also getting things that you don't need and then being angry about it. You know what I mean? Instead of asking for what you want and what you need. You don't know what you need until it's in your lap and you don't need it. You're like, I don't want this. Yeah. But you can't say what you want, right? It's like, what you give me is not enough, but I kind of don't know until I have it. So kind of exploring what your needs are, what you really like and what you require from a relationship. Like, what your love language is.
Not learning what you require, and then, because I feel like this would be kind of the second part of codependency, then going into therapy with that resentment and stuff, going home, right? And like projecting all that on your partner of like, I'm not myself, and
you did this to me.
And
yes, that's a good point.